Hello everyone. Welcome to part 2 of Ethics in Research series. In the last series or the part we have covered what is ethics in research or the ethical clearance in research, and what are the main points which we have to keep in mind whenever we are conducting any kind of research in any of the fields. Today, we are going to cover what are the consequences if we miss on, even unintentionally or intentionally, if we miss on any important aspects of ethics or ethics clearance. What are the repercussions which the stakeholders and we as a researcher may face? The first is the legal consequences. So, if we are not complying to any important law or legislations, we might face that. The second is the academic and professional consequence. So remember that we, as an academic involved in research, own the responsibility of integrity and honesty. So if once the academic or the professional image is hampered, it may have the long term repercussions, right? So, as an academic, we have to be very mindful about the ethics and the integrity and honesty part of the research. The second comes the participant harms. So, if we are missing on any of the issue which we have discussed in the last part of our video or this series as well, that we have to make sure that the participant, the respondent who is participating in the research, whatever conditions we have agreed on mutually, we have to take care of them. Additionally, we have to assure while the data collection or the interview or whatever interaction you are doing with the participant, they should not be under any kind of pressure. They should be comfortable. The next comes the research quality issues. Remember, as a researcher, the quality, the integrity, the honesty, a lot of responsibility lies on the shoulder of us as a researcher. So let's maintain that across the research project, across the structure and the process we are adopting. Remember that if we miss on any of the ethics or following any of the ethics or legislations, it also has an institutional harm, that is the institution we are belonging to. Okay, so the institution will also hamper or suffer the losses, or they may also get impacted. So let's be mindful about each and every stage and the consequences that are majorly involved when any kind of ethics unintentionally or intentionally gets overlooked. Let's cover the legal consequence first. The lawsuits. The participant can sue for the damage if harmed during the research. Okay, so if any respondent is not comfortable, they may sue the researcher or the stakeholders involved. Criminal charges, violation of any privacy laws or data uh, protection regulations. So we may get a criminal charges against us. So let's be mindful of this aspect as well. Because remember, if we have agreed on a condition that the data will be kept confidential, and because of any reason the data gets public, or the data gets leaked, it's the responsibility of the researcher, and we have to be very cautious about it. Then comes the regulatory penalties, like fines or sanctions from the oversight bodies can be put on us as a researcher. For example, universities can face the hefty fines from the government agencies for conducting any unauthorized human subject research. Okay, so let's be mindful about the legal consequences. A few examples I have just shared with you. Then comes the academic and professional consequences. So let's say if we have missed on any important aspects of ethics, the publication may gets rejected. So the reputable journals won't publish or not will never ever publish any research without the ethical approval. Okay, so they ask us. So remember, whenever we are submitting a research paper, we have to check a checkbox wherein it is written that whether the human participants are involved in this research or not. If they are involved, whether the necessary permissions are being taken or not. So we as a researcher have to give the declaration that yes or no, or whatever is involved, we have to declare that. Then the career damage. In case of any ethics breach, as an academic, our professional credibility and future research opportunities are also at stake. So let's be mindful about that aspect as well. Then comes the degree revocation. So, if in case, if it's a dissertation, if it's a PhD thesis, uh, and it comes to the notice that some ethical violations are being done later on, the degrees can be revocated uh, if the culprits are found and if the ethical violations are being noticed. The last but not the least, the employment termination can also happen if losing the academic or research positions can also happen if a proper ethics are not being followed. Because remember, we are not only as a researcher involved in the research. Across the stakeholders, there are so many, across the process and structures, there are so many stakeholders involved, and we have to keep in mind each and everybody's interest. Then comes the participants' harm, privacy violations. Never ever do that. And let's be mindful about the information being projected. Psychological harms we have covered already in the last video. We should not cause any kind of emotional distress without a proper safeguards, or we have to keep continuously an eye and keep monitoring that the participants are comfortable. Then comes the economic damage, that the participants losing jobs if we have agreed that the data will be kept confidential, and if the data comes out or any identity of the participant comes out, they may lose their jobs, right? So further we can, our research can get impacted and we as a researcher may lose our credibility. Social harm, the damage to the relationships and community standing. So let's say if respondent is sharing some data being in some, let's say, some public office, so he or she cannot leave the office and cannot go into the other job. But if the information comes out, he or she will face the lifetime repercussions of sharing the information with the or participating in the research, right? So it will damage the relationships and the community standing throughout the rest of the years. So let's not do that. And let's be very mindful about this topic. Then comes the quality issues. So, poor ethical practices sometimes even leads to the poor research designing. Let's be let's note this point. Then comes the unusable data. Research results cannot be published or applied if the data is not ethically collected or not properly collected. For example, if a respondent is not comfortable and he or she is some under pressure, definitely the data or the information which he or she is sharing is not correct, right? Because he or she is not mentally uh, able to give you the answers of the questions correctly. So in that case, the data might give the false outputs. So let's note this point as well. Last but not the least, the institutional harm, that loss of funding can happen if the research grants can be withdrawn, even if any kind of ethics misuse or violation of ethics are being noticed. Then comes the accreditation issues. If the any kind of researcher is found affiliated to any institution, and if the institutions come to know about it, and even the higher regulatory authorities come to know about it, that the researchers of these institutions are violating any kind of ethics side of the research, then their research credentials might get impacted and the accreditation also can be hampered or can be, can suffer. Then comes the reputation damage. So if any kind of violation occurs, it gives, or the institution have to face the loss on the credibility and public trust across the years, right? Because it's very difficult to maintain that credibility and public trust. And if anything like this happens, even if once, then the entire credibility or the institutional image comes at the cost. So this was in brief about what are the repercussions and the consequences that can be faced by the researchers and all the related stakeholders if any kind of violations are being done at the research or at the ethics level. What we have to do is to be cautious about each and every process, structure, stakeholder involved in the research process so that we conduct the research keeping all the aspects which we have discussed in this video in mind. In the next video, we are going to cover what are the guidelines which we as a researchers can keep in mind to safeguard and to conduct the entire process very, very swiftly. But for this video, that's all. Thank you.